Hi everyone. Today we're going to go over chords on the guitar. We're going to go over 7 main types of chords that we use on the guitar. They are open chords, which means they utilize a combination of notes that are fretted, so notes you use your finger to play the strings, and some where we use open strings, so it's a combination of fretted notes and open strings. We're going to be going over the C chord, A, G, E, D, and then 2 variations of the E and the A chord, A minor and E minor. Okay, so 7 chords. What you're going to see, I'm going to project on the board up here, you're going to see some chord diagrams. And what that is that's a basic kind of perspective of looking at the guitar, kind of from this perspective right here. So imagine you have a sort of grid pattern and you're looking at the strings from left to right. So the 6th string is on your left, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then you have, on these diagrams, 3 frets. Now you're going to see the nut up here, which is kind of a dark black line, and then 3 other kind of lighter lines, and that represents the frets, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd fret. Then you see black dots. Black dots are where you put your fingers. And most of these chords just use the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd finger. There are going to be some variations that might use the 4th finger. But all these chords that we show up here, they're going to have combinations of 3 fingers generally. So just kind of various combinations of these fingers. You'll also see at the bottom of the diagram, you're going to see numbers, and that represents the finger numbers. So you can see an exact kind of coordinate of where you put your fingers. So where on the string, which string you put it on, which fret on that string, and then using what finger. Okay. The other thing we need to keep in mind with this is to have the proper finger pressure, and you're going to have even pressure in all fingers. So we had gone over some exercises on that before, and you have to be really careful, right? And there are going to be various methods of exercising that. You can look at some of the other videos that I've put up on that topic. And generally, for example, this first chord, the C chord, what you're normally going to find when you're first starting out with this stuff is that it's really hard to isolate each finger to its particular string that it should be playing. For example, on this chord, your middle finger, right? Your middle finger is playing on the 4th string on the 2nd fret. Okay, that note right there. But if you don't watch out, if you're not really paying attention, you let your finger rest against the string below it, which should be ringing open, right? But the flesh of your finger kind of bumps up against that string, right? Yeah, kind of a pain, right? So so you just have to be really careful with our fingering in that case, okay? In order to help with that, one thing you might do, and as we've talked about before, there's a precise placement of your finger on the string. Okay, so imagine this pencil is the string, right? We've talked about keeping your finger, more or less perpendicular to the guitar fingerboard. But what you might need to do, and in fact, what you will need to do on a lot of chords, is sometimes you might have to have your finger touching the string a little bit closer to where your fingernail is. So you can see I'm kind of not really at that exact perpendicular angle. You might go the opposite way too, to where your finger is touching the string a little bit more by where the pad of your finger is. So there's kind of a large workable area. And you're not going to be able to play every single chord with your fingers in the exact position. So what I just talked about, like on this C chord, my 1st finger is a little bit more of that sort of perpendicular perspective. But as you can see, I get to this 3rd finger right here, and I'm playing a little bit more towards the pad of the finger. I can't get each one in exactly the same, quote unquote, perfect positioning. So it's going to take a little time to feel each chord, to develop your muscle memory for that particular chord. and it's a little bit different for everybody. So I can, I could tell you what it's like for me, but just it might not help you much. So in general, you need to try it out for yourself, really take account of how each chord feels, and then try to play each note in the chord, right? So I'm using a pick. So if you play each note, and you just want to, make sure that while you're playing it, there's no dead string in there, or dead note in there. Now again, using the example of the C chord, we're using a combination of notes that are fretted, right? And then notes that are on open strings, the G and the E in this example, and you have a fretted C in between. So we have really two opportunities to sort of have improper finger positioning. That third string, that's going to be deadened by my second finger, even if I'm using just the right pressure on the C note. But index finger could be collapsed, or it could be a little bit too far towards the first string. So you're just going to have to feel that one out for yourself. And it takes a little bit of time. Okay, so I've talked a little bit about the C chord. Let's officially talk about the C chord, right? So you're using your first, second, and third fingers, and in the configuration that you see in the chart. Okay, now notice on the very top of the chart, you're also going to, you're going to see a circle, which means it's on top of a string. You're going to play that string, that particular string, open. Remember, from this perspective, right? And on some chords, you may see an X, and that simply means you don't play that string. So in this example, there's an X over the sixth string. You don't play that string at all, okay? And notice the fingering on the bottom. So again, from this perspective, go left to right. You don't play the sixth string, but the fifth string, you can see that there's a note on the third fret, and you're using your third finger, right? Go to the fourth string, you're using your second finger, okay? Second finger on the second fret, and then the third string is open, right? But then you use your first finger, how about that, on the second string, first fret. And then the first string is open. You can see the 0, the O above on the chart. Okay, so that chord sounds like this. Okay, so we'll kind of do two methods of, for now, playing the chords. Use a pick, and you simply strum through, play all the notes of the chord. But then I want you to try and play them individually. The notes of the chord individually, that is. Again, just to sort of audit the sound of each note, make sure you can play them. Now later on in a different video, we're going to go over some strumming patterns, some basic strumming patterns. But for now, we're just going to go over the chords. Okay, so the next chord is A. A is played this way. It sounds like this. Okay, each individual note. Now I'm playing it with this fingering. This is a fingering I don't normally play or don't normally use, but this is kind of the traditional fingering of that chord. You should know that pattern or know that fingering, but just know that I like to switch the first and second fingers from this chord right here. And the reason is, if you notice in this fingering, we should be playing all these notes really close to the fret, but I can't get my fingers that close together. I think my hands are too big, fingers are too big, and so it puts this note on the fourth string, puts it up too far away from the fret. So I get kind of that sound. It sounds pretty terrible, right? So I like to switch the second and first fingers, and you can see the fingering for that up on the board. Okay, so it puts the second and third fingers really close to the fret, and then the first finger is a lot closer to the fret, sort of tucked behind those, behind the second and third finger. So it sounds a lot clearer, right? Nice and clear. Okay, but just know that there are those two fingerings for that particular chord. Okay. Next chord is the G chord. This one also has a couple of different variations, 3 to be exact. I think the easiest one to learn is this way right here. So you have your second finger on the 6th string, first finger on the 5th string, and then you have your 4th finger all the way down here on the 1st string. That's a big leap. Way up there. Big leap. Right? Pretty easy to grab that with your 4th finger though. And again, keep both of these fingers really close to the fret. Keep all of them close to the fret, but especially on this chord. This one might feel a little awkward at first, but all of those notes sound like this. Okay, individually. Okay, so I think that's probably the easiest way to play it. You can alternately, you can use your 3rd finger instead of the 4th finger. So I would just switch those, and you can see the fingering on the board. So I just exchange the 4th finger for the 3rd finger. Okay, so either way, they don't sound any different. You should practice both fingerings though. There's one more fingering. This is the tough one, but it has its advantages. Okay, so I would use your 3rd finger on the 6th string, 3rd fret, 2nd finger on the 5th string, 2nd fret, and then your 4th finger all the way down here on the 1st string, 3rd fret, on the G in the 1st string. Right, all 3 fingerings. They don't sound any different, right? It's just a fingering. Okay, we'll talk about why at the end of the video, why you would have all these different fingerings. Okay, that's G, right? Now the E chord, here's the E chord, sounds like this. All right, nice big chord. Okay, and you can see the fingering up there. It's the only fingering we have for that one. So there's the E chord. Okay. Now the D chord, this one also only has one fingering that we use for that, and that is this. Sounds like this. Okay, so you can see the fingering for that. Hopefully you're getting a good, getting used to reading the chord charts. You can always rewind the video, of course, and listen to the explanation again if you want to, if you're still a little bit confused. On this one as well, you might be tempted to keep your fingers really close together like this. Just make sure this 3rd finger is going to have to go a little bit farther away from your 1st and 2nd finger, a little bit farther than you think it might, or that it might feel comfortable. But you want to get it as close to the fret as possible, right? This 3rd finger should be on the 3rd fret, not back here, but should be up here. Okay. Okay, so we've talked about the main types of chords. We have these first 5 chords. As I mentioned before, there are a couple of variations. So we just learned about the E chord, right? That's E, it's what we call E major. But if you take your 1st finger off of the 3rd string, which is creating this note, take it off, and you're playing the open 3rd string instead. Sounds different, right? Here's E, and there's E minor. It's just a simple variation. And for that, we have a couple of fingerings as well. You notice I have this fingering up here. This is the 2nd and 3rd finger. But you can use the 1st and 2nd finger instead. Again, it doesn't sound different. Just a different fingering. Okay. And then one more chord. This is A minor. So this is a variation of A. Here's A that we learned before. This one will have to change fingerings pretty drastically, but it's simply moving this note on the 2nd string, moving it back 1 fret. So the chord looks like this and sounds like this. Okay. So that gives us 7 chords. We have C, we have A, we have G, we have E, we have E minor, and we have D. and then we have A minor. Okay, so those 7 chords. Okay, now why the variation in the fingerings? Why wouldn't we just have one variation? In a later video, we'll talk about some of the basic chord progressions. And that's really where it matters, where you would have a certain fingering and favor one fingering over another. It depends on the transitions of chords. So we have to keep in mind, what chord are we playing right now? What chord do we need to get to next? And there are patterns in music, so it's not like you have to, discern this every single time you pick up the guitar and it's different every single time. Not really. There are patterns that you will be able to follow, and is actually pretty easy. So with that, that's all we have for this video. Go ahead and take some time to practice the chords. Make sure they're all clear and clean. You might not necessarily feel super musical just playing the chords or trying to look at the notes. If notes aren't coming out clear, we're not really playing in a rhythm at this point. We just have to get used to the chords and start getting a muscle memory for each chord. The next thing we're going to get to are learning some basic rhythmic patterns, and that's going to require knowing the chords super well and not having to think about it too much. Remember, what is a C chord? How do I play that C chord? Or to go from a G chord to a C, you remember G, but you don't remember C very well. So we have to get past that point. So we'll have to make sure we get some practice with that. So hope that video helped, and we will see you next time. Thank you.